Hey all, boardgamerants here where you'll find everything solo tabletop gaming and more. And we're going to go over Vital Lacerda's CO2 Second Chance, last chance to see if he can produce a solo variant that I'm impressed with. Let's have a look, talk about it on the other side. So welcome to CO2 Second Chance, a Vital Lacerda game that has been reskinned and basically had a huge overhaul since I think it's 2011, a long time ago, the original game came out. And the original game came out and it was all just multiplayer competitive. Now you have a multiplayer competitive or cooperative or solo with this production, which of course is the main reason why I was so interested. And also too, it looks way different. I mean, you look at the different boards. This one's much more. It's beautiful, beautiful work here. It looks gorgeous on the table. So what are you doing? Well, of course you're trying to reduce pollution. All of this energy demand has created tremendous CO2 levels in our atmosphere, and we are going to be playing CEO of a company commissioned to provide greener energy, and in that way trying to reduce population. And we have to, when you're playing solo, you have to accomplish a number of things while you're playing the game, because you can lose very multiple points of the game. Can you just instantly lose, like if pollution gets too high, or if you lose all your victory points, done. And if you don't accomplish certain goals here, like these are some goals here that I drew from those decks. You got some lobbyist cards. If you take certain actions, they'll help you out. And then you've got some goals here, solo goals, and then these are cooperative goals that you incorporate in a solo game. And so that's what these cards represent, certain goals I have to achieve by the end of the game, or I lose. These are UN goals, so I have to have built or provided infrastructure, so essentially built certain types of power plants in order to complete these UN goals. And if I haven't completed 7 of those 10 goals here by the end of the game, I lose. Of course, you want to do more and more, because the more you do by the end of the game, if you can accomplish all your goals, you score higher. So in the game, you're going to be building these very cool power plants, and there's relatively few actions to take for your main action. You're going to be building power plants is your main thing, and you're going to be taking an action to either propose a power plant, or start developing its infrastructure, or actually building it, and you have to do it in that order. So if I wanted to propose a, let's say, wind power plant, I'd have to propose it. It goes down there. Then I'd have to take another, so that would be the proposed action. Then later on, I'd have to do another action to create its infrastructure. And I'm doing this very simplistically. There's all sorts of other stuff you get to do here, but that would create its infrastructure. And then later on, I would want to take the build power plant. And then I would take this, I would scooch it over, and bam, there in, there's these very nice wooden pieces. And then bam, you can see yourself. There is a completed wind power plant, and that I have created in Europe. And having done that, I get to place a cube here, which is starting to develop my control of the area, which will give me access to these permits, which are very important. These you have to use these CEPs. These carbon emission permits are part of a cost, along with having to spend money, along with having to spend technology cubes in order to do all these things that I just did. So that's what's going to happen. You're going to be filling out this board and building plants, be it in Europe or Africa, etc., all the way around. These came out randomly too. They tell you what type of plants each area wants and won't accept at the same time. And then, like for instance, South Africa really wants wind. Second best is hydro, and third best is recycling. And so those are the only kind of power plants that you can build, and those are all over here. You got recycling there, hydro, wind, solar, and forestry. And those are the 5 different types of plants you can build. And in that way, you're going to be filling out this board, and each time you take certain actions, you get, you know, very, very Vital Lacerda like, you're going to be covering up areas, and then when you cover up an area, you're going to get its goodies, and then, you know, when you take another step, you're going to get certain goodies, and you get goodies, but it also costs you things to put stuff out there. And so you're going to be balancing all these resources, which again are usually these little CEPs, these technology cubes, and money. And when you're building power plants, that's what's going to give you victory points. And you're going to play it over the course of 4 decades. And at the end of each decade, you're going to have to judge yourself based on these randomly placed environmental goals. So you've got goals here, which tell you what type of power plants this particular game you need to be focusing on. So you need to build solar, hydro plant, couple recycling power plants. You need to build on Oceania, Africa, Europe, Asia. And then over here, this is, as you focus on building power plants, you're gonna develop your knowledge in that area. So this little area here, these little environmental goals have to do with your knowledge tracks, which are taken into account over here. Like when I first placed the plan for this wind proposal, for this wind project, I would have moved up 1 on my knowledge track right there. And then as this goes across, it's going to allow you to build certain types, level 1 and level 2 power plants. And then you will get certain goodies as you go across. Also, too, you'll notice these numbers on the top. And as you develop in each of these knowledge areas, that's going to affect your income at the end of each round. You'll just kind of add up. You know, if my token was here at 4 and this one was here at 1, well, I'd get 4 or 5 income at the end of that decade. Of course, your knowledge is going to go up on all these tracks for the most part. And there's 1 for each type of power plant you can create. And then again, back to the environmental goals. So again, power plants, your knowledge in each area, and then here has to do with summits. So you've got scientists here that you're going to be placing. These scientists first are going to go out and typically you're going to be placing them on projects, and then from the projects they're going to be moving over to taking up spots on the appropriate summits here. And depending on what project they came from, you would place a scientist there. Once you've got, you know, some of them have 3 spots, 2 spots, 4 spots. Once you've got all the spots filled out in a particular area, like in Paris, if I had another scientist here, then at the end of my turn, I would get to hold the summit, and it would increase my tracks of knowledge in solar. It would increase my tracks of knowledge in hydro. I can kind of decide how I want to divvy that out. And when you accomplish these summits, that is where these environmental goals come into play. You know, I want to have accomplished the summit that had exactly 2 different topics, for instance, for that one, or I want to accomplish summits that have scientists on the forestry symbols or recycling, or so this has to do with holding summits. And when you complete these things, you get to flip them over, and then they're not going to count against you, because at the end of every decade, they're going to count against you. Whatever you haven't completed here is going to will reduce your victory points. And if ever your victory points are reduced down to 0 or past 0, you'll lose the game. Also, while you're doing all these things, you got to watch your pollution. Your pollution levels are going to go up. And your pollution levels are going to go up because if you are not meeting the demands of the energy out here, the energy needs of all these nations or all these regions, you're going to start getting coal power plants out there because they're the cheapest and easiest, and you have to meet the energy needs each decade. And if you don't, you're going to get these things, which this is going to suck up one of those CEPs, and it's going to increase by 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 40. So from 400 to 440, my CO2 levels. And if it gets past this 500 mark and I can't do anything about it, I lose the game. So there's all of these things occurring that are raising your pollution levels, and it's a race against time as you're trying to increase your knowledge, complete these UN goals, make sure you've taken care of your own personal, cooperative, and solo goals, making sure you're getting your scientists out learning, talking at summits, achieving all of these, each of these little environmental goals, all the while watching your pollution levels, trying to keep those down, earning victory points mainly. Now you get a little bit for completing UN goals, but mainly for building power plants do you achieve these victory points. And you'll need those victory points to counter what you're going to lose each round as you try and accomplish all of these environmental goals. This is very typical heavy Vital Lacerda goodness. And there's a lot of things to be worrying about while you're trying to build your power plants. But each game setup, you're going to have different summits that come out. You're going to have different environmental goals. You're going to have different regions that want different things. You're going to have different UN goals. You're going to have different solo, and these goals will help you play that particular game a certain way. And if you do it in a correct pattern and step, and you've got 4 decades to do it, and in each decade you get basically 4 turns, at the end of that 4th decade, you're going to see if you won or lost, and how well you did if you survived. Like most Vital Lacerda games, it's a lot. There's muchness in this game. All his games are heavy, all the big box games, and I have gone through them all now, at least the ones that I'm aware of. I've gone through, I think it started with the Gallerist a couple years ago. It's my first intro to Vital Lacerda. Then I've gone through Vinyos, Escape Plan, Kanban, On Mars, Lisboa, and now CO2 Second Chance. I think that's all of them. And Vital Lacerda, as I've mentioned on other reviews and talked about before, just has that beautifully done, thematic, heavy, crunchy Euro, and does it in such a way that I find so appealing. Just the main gameplay, that I've just been compelled to find these games and purchase these games, even though after the first couple I kind of realized, this is from the solo standpoint, these things, they're lacking. It's like, and I've described it as the solo variants always get kind of the leftovers of this magnificent design. Any energy left, any creativity left just kind of gets, here's a little, so you can play solo, which I've always appreciated because at least gives me a chance to play and experience the games, and they're all well worth experiencing. But from a purely solo perspective point, I've kind of constantly had an issue with them, and they're lacking, not only in their design, but also too, just oftentimes in just the rules are so well done, revolving around the multiplayer, and not so well done in explaining how to play solo. All of them have had interesting issues. And so is this any different? CO2 Second Chance, a lot going on there, but as you get to playing the game, and it has kind of the typical, you can take an action or two. You're supposed to only take one action, main action, and then you've got these executive actions that you can take. And this is a very common thread throughout Vital Lacerda games, and this is one of his first. It might have been his first big game. I don't really honestly know. But I got to wrap up my series of him with this game, and it's almost a shame, but it's also just how I'd love to finish my series with him, because this game impressed me the most. The effort that went into it from a solo standpoint, and I so appreciate it. And I guess I'll kind of get into it. So thematically, this game is, it's about trying to reduce pollution. CO2 levels are rising in our atmosphere, and it's due to just all sorts of things. One of the main contributors is just dirty energy, and as we grow in population, we have to produce all this energy, and all that energy is producing a lot of pollution. So there's a big demand to create greener options for energy, and that's what the game's about. You have to balance all these things, and the game is played over 4 rounds, in which you get 4 decades. Then you get 4 turns in each of those rounds. But actually, there's a way when you're playing solo, you can get up to 8 turns per decade by just bumping up the CO2 level, bumping up the pollution level. So you take that where there's a balance, and it's cheaper to do that in the early decades versus the later decades. And so there's a lot to consider with this game. But I love how when you set it up, you automatically, I mean, the theme is comes through quite vividly, a lot because of the beautiful pieces here. And you actually feel like you're constructing a power plant, because first you lay out these little plans, and then you might have a scientist go over there and sit on those plans and learn about them, and then increase your knowledge in that track. And then you have to build the infrastructure, which is this little piece that you add to the plans, to the proposal. And then when you build the plant, you actually add on to that. So you've got this little cool little structure that you've actually built, and it feels like you're building something. And the pieces are also vivid, and the color is also beautiful. That really, and then you're watching the CO2 level is rising and falling as you're doing things, and you've got all of these goals you have to keep track of. And so it's just done wonderfully. This is just a wonderful game. It really is. And the mechanics just sing like they usually do with a Vital Lacerda game. And always top heavy, as far as, or not top heavy, but I don't know what I'm trying to say, but just the learning curve in the beginning is a lot. But once you get over that curve, and you get into the flow of the game, and you realize basically just how, again, the main actions you can do, there's only 3, and it all has to do with building the power plant, either proposing a project, creating the infrastructure, or building it. And you can't take the same action the same time in a turn, so you have to balance it out. You might want to throw a proposal out over there in Europe, and then work on your infrastructure over here in Africa or whatever. And you have to balance all these things out, because you can't take the same action each turn. You can take up to 2 turns when you're playing solo, but you can't take the same thing. You couldn't do 2 proposals or 2 infrastructures. So lots of things to consider. And the way the mechanics all, when you take an action, you cover up stuff, you get stuff. And when you're moving up tracks, you get stuff, and you're increasing your income streams. And all of these things feed in beautifully in the way Vital Lacerda does with his games, like very few people can pull off in a sensical manner. And it's just fantastic from the mechanic standpoint. Variability is it's completely off the charts, because I don't know if it's off the charts, but I mean, there's so much. First, you're going to have different regions that want different types of power each game. That's randomized. And as I think I was going over, there's different environmental goals, and you're going to have different UN goals. You're going to have a different solo goal. You're going to have different lobbyist cards. You can draw 5 cards that kind of help you as you take certain actions. You get little bonus stuff. That's random. Lots of randomization for each setup, which allows you to, at least otherwise it'd just be like, well, I don't know what to start on. But it all gives you things to start on. Also, too, part of the solo game is to play this variant that kind of dictates and tell you, 2 of the most important environmental goals you better accomplish that decade, or you're going to get penalized 2 times for it. And the penalties go up. There's like, for each environmental goal you don't achieve in the first decade, it dings you 1 point for each one. But in the second decade, it dings you 2 victory points for each one. The third decade, 3. And the fourth, 4. And if you have gotten to the 4th decade and you don't complete that one, there's 2 that you better do, or it's going to double the penalty. So if you get 8 victory points dinged because you didn't achieve 1 environmental goal, I mean, you're kind of done. I mean, you're just you played it wrong. Anyway, lots of variability with this game. The length of play too is very. I mean, for all the gameness in it, about an hour and a half, I would say. To set up and reset up, it takes a good 10 minutes. It's a lot to kind of reshuffle around and get it going. So I'd say, an hour and a half is a good playtime for a game like this. And it just flies right by while you're playing. There's just so much to think about and so many little actions to take that it does not feel like an hour and a half game while you're playing it, in a good way. The rule book, again, I feel was so beautiful and succinct for the multiplayer, but again, in the solo, it was well done, and I think the solo was well done in general here, but I think it's easier too to design a solo game around an already cooperative game. So it already had that going for it. You don't have to necessarily develop an AI opponent like you might have to on Mars and all the other games that are played competitively. You don't have to create an opponent with the solo system. It's already in there. There's already an AI incorporated in the cooperative game. So now you just have to add some stuff to the solo game to make it work if you're just playing by yourself. And it was done perfectly. And at least, I don't know about perfectly, but it was done very well. Better than any other official solo variant by Vital Lacerda for one of his games. This, by far, I feel, is the best one. But within the rules, there was some things like, when you complete a summit, for every scientist you had on that summit, you're supposed to be able to move up on 2 tracks. Well, not on 2 tracks. You're supposed to be able to move up well, anyway, 2 times per scientist, you move up on a knowledge track. But I was reading and it said, well, in testing, you're supposed to only move up 1. I was like, oh, okay, all right. So, and then people were like, so if you want to, you can do it, you can play it the way, it's all written, but, this is the way it was really kind of the intended. So you can increase the difficulty. But it's like there was nothing in there about that. It's like it didn't get put in the rules. The other, I'll take a little break there, a little FedEx delivery. I got a couple more games that just came. It's a little distracting. I could hear it. Anyway, the other part of the rules thing was it kind of explains in the rules, okay, you basically play it the same way with these exceptions. But one of the goals, the solo goals, was to build 10 power plants. Well, every player only has the opportunity to build 8 infrastructures, and you can't build any more power plants than you have infrastructures for. So it's like, how do you do that? So you look up in the FAQ, and it's like, you can use other pieces to build those power plants. Well, it doesn't say that anywhere. And so it's just kind of like, and that changed the whole game. I'd already played 3 games or so thinking that I was limited in that. So I was getting to the 4th decade and I was kind of limited in what I could do because I thought I was limited in the components. Turns out I wasn't, but it's like, okay, well, how far does that go? Does that mean I can use, does that mean I can use the extra scientists as well? Because usually you're limited to 4. So again, just like things slip through the cracks that are very important for the solo, and it did so again with the rules here. And here it's just like, it's so beautifully well done. It's like, why were these couple things neglected? Why was it not put in there? And so anyway, it's those things that just frustrate me, especially when you've got 9 years that you from the beginning that you designed the game. So, but that's really my only complaint for the solo, and it had to do with the rules, and there it was again. It was just like, these are such simple things, but you back to escape plan and the solo. There was last minute changes that didn't make it into the official game, and then on Mars there was some cards that came for escape plan to help correct some of those mistakes. But even then, not all the cards needed to correct the mistakes were added in the on Mars game, and they were added to the on Mars game. They weren't added to the the flipping escape plan game. Just for as beautiful as these games are, as expensive as these games are because they're put out by Eagle Gryphon, I would just hope that those things wouldn't happen. There's just you should be getting premium everything for that cost that you pay for Eagle Gryphon games. But going back to CO2 Second Chance, that was put out by Stronghold Games, I think, and it was half. I got it for like 50 something bucks. Less than half what I paid for almost all the other games. And it was every bit as good a game. The components were fantastic. The solo variant was top notch. The value, for this game is incredible and so well worth it. I mean, if this was the game that I had started with for Vital Lacerda and solo variants and had gone into all the other games with this expectation, I would have been sorely disappointed at the end. But to kind of stumble through all the games and all the solo variants, and then like with the Lisboa, I was explaining how that solo variant that came with Lisboa fell short for me, but there was an unofficial solo variant that was developed that was way more to my liking and really made Lisboa a solo game that I could enjoy. I always kind of found a way to still enjoy Vital Lacerda and what he does in his designs, which again are just, I just love it. I just love this designer and what he does. And I just wish the solo variants matched it more closely. And this is the one that matches the closest. The solo variant is excellent. So I mean, I don't know. I probably rambled on enough. This is well worth picking up if you had to pick up one Vital Lacerda game and you were looking for the most complete solo experience official for that solo game, and you're looking to spend the least amount of money. This is the one. And it was my last one. It's one I get to finish up with. I just got to wrap this up. I could ramble on forever, but the overall enjoyability for this game is at the highest level of all his games. Is it still my favorite game of his? No, but as a game that gives you its complete package for the solo gaming enthusiast, this is the one. Until next time, I'm boardgamerants. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm out.